final guest this morning is our newly elected MP for the new area of East Grinstead and Uckfield, Mims Davies. Mims, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. Welcome to Ashdown Radio.
I'm so pleased to be here. I really am, particularly because I was the radio presenter's nightmare when I tried to come on the radio last week in the House of Commons and the technicals failed. You were too whiz-bang for us.
We just couldn't get the connection through
we
to you.
We couldn't.
But before we get into the politics bits, you walked in and said, yeah, I know a bit about radio because I used to work in radio and I'm still a presenter. Tell us about your radio work.
Yeah, so I'm loving my life, really. Don't tell my dog or my children that. But I accidentally became a radio presenter when I was living in Swansea in South Wales. I lived there for around 10 years. I worked for the local radio station, commercial station. This is obviously a community station, and there are many of them across the country. So I was very honoured. I meant there are other community stations out there, one called Mid Sussex.
That's okay. We consider Mid Sussex and Seahaven and Elsham, we consider them, they're all partners. They do different areas. No problems at all.
And I was on Meridian last week in East Grinstead. So I see them as a really important way of connecting with the community. And I was asked a little while ago, would you be interested in doing a show? And then the word 80s came out of somebody's mouth. So I do an 80s, 90s and naughty show on a Sunday. So it's lovely to be here. And I know how much work all you volunteers put into putting together a great community knowledge base for people and ultimately for local businesses and organisations to have a voice. So it's lovely to be here.
And I didn't expect when you walked in the door today as our new MP for you to say to me, yeah, and I work on radio. So it's good to have you here. Let's talk though about the reason you're here, which is as our newly elected MP.
Yeah.
Could I start though at the hustings that we held recently? You very bravely, the first thing you said when you spoke was you said, look, I'm not in my best place here. I've been up all night. My daughter's been taken ill abroad, and it's been a bit of a tough time. And you were very honest with people as to how you were feeling that day. So could I just ask you to sort of perhaps finish that story off for us?
Yes.
How is your daughter, and how do things work out?
Yeah, and thank you for raising that, and thank you for the understanding I had both from the other candidates and those in the room and those that followed up afterwards. The ironic thing is my daughter was away for about 3.5 years, it felt like, 3.5 months on her gap trip, and things were absolutely fine, but she was on a trip to Zante with her friends, had an incident on the last night, and I had that 3 o'clock in the morning dreadful phone call of, please don't worry, but your daughter's in hospital, which of course is an oxymoron in itself. Initially they thought she had a bleed on the brain because she'd taken an awful bang, and we were in that parental nightmare, my ex-husband and I, about where do we go, what do you do, because being an island, it wasn't clear whether she was being sent to the mainland for further treatment, what was happening, and of course limited flights, and of course I was in the middle of a general election dealing with the Foreign Office and doing actually what very often we do as members of Parliament on behalf of constituents. And the ironic thing is, all being well, in September she'll be joining Sussex Police as a degree apprentice. And I said, darling, you have learnt what it's like to be in that hospital bed, to be dealing with people when things go wrong, and really knowing those human frailties. So she's learning to take it a bit slowly. I think young people don't realise quite how fragile they are. She is okay and hopefully on track as she passes the physical to join in September. Otherwise, there may be a little delay.
Good news. And it was a nice touch actually at the hustings, because Benedict Dempsey was the one who sort of after you, and on behalf of all the other candidates, and an applause to them to give you their support, which is a nice touch.
Yeah, we got on horribly well. It was terrible, actually, in politics to get on really well. But I do think we were all completely driven by our beliefs and sense of community, and credit to him and everyone who stands. We're going to always need councillors and people stepping up. We've seen with Trump, I'm afraid it's a more dangerous and worrying time for anybody to be in frontline politics. Since I've been in frontline politics, 2 members of our Parliament have been lost. So I think it's really imperative as we get into this new government and this next stage in our country to bring people together and to focus on what is the common good. And I really feel that we managed to do that in our local election campaign.
And the elephant question in the room for yourself as a Conservative, and I'm sure you've been asked this ever since the election day, is why do you think Conservatives overall did so badly?
I think we lost it. I'm not totally sure that Labour really won it. If you dig into the figures and what's going on, I don't think we explained Conservative values enough of aspiration of freeing people up, being there at your most vulnerable and helping you to move forward. And I think there was too much navel gazing and infighting. And I think if we don't showcase that honesty, then how will we win back the trust that we need? And if you look at the Labour Party, just 5 years ago, they were in disarray. I think politics is much less tribal than it was. I think there is I've never believed in any kind of safe seats. You've got to work extremely hard for your electorate and your community and be at the front line of that. And I think we as Conservatives need to win that trust back, explain what we believe in and work very, very hard on a local level. And that test will be in the ballot box again next year when we have the East Sussex and West Sussex County Council elections.
And could I ask you on the thorny issue of immigration and the illegal boat crossings? Now, before the election, I know you could only give me one answer to this question, but now you're not in government anymore, and you're not being whipped into the answer. I mean, do you really think Rwanda was really that good an idea?
I do honestly believe we needed a deterrent.
But was Rwanda the right deterrent? Really, honestly?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around the Rwanda deal, and it wasn't just as a safe third country. And you will have seen the former Prime Minister, our leader, still Rishi Sunak, trying to say, well, where do people go? How does this work if there isn't somewhere that we can return people to? And we have settled legally over 500,000 people since 2017, people in need, whether it's from Yemen or Syria, from British Hong Kong nationals to those coming from Ukraine. And this is a global issue. And I think one thing that Rishi, as Prime Minister, managed to do with Maloney is get this finally on an international level. If you look at America, whether it's the Mexican border and other areas and across the wider EU, this is a real challenge. And that's why I think our foreign aid policy and helping people to stay in country and stay safe locally is also really important, and we need to be showing leadership that way. But the other side of the Rwanda policy was also an economic development side, and they are an ally and they need to be respected. And again, they were a country in deep problems and disarray just a few years ago and now see a very bright future, and we need to make sure that we're doing the same for other countries, including our own.
And we'll see how that obviously develops over the coming months. So you've won the seat. It's a brand new seat for East Greater Nutfield, new seat carved out. You spoke about, I mean, if I look at the numbers, yes, you've got a clear majority, sort of 19,000 and something. But actually what was interesting was the other parties scored very highly as well. And you could look at it and say, actually, the opposition to the Conservatives in this area was actually split. And for Labour to get, in this area, which is traditionally a very hard blue area, I mean, they got over 10,000 votes in this area, which would be unheard of a few years ago.
And I think I've mentioned it. I don't think there's any givens now in people's political allegiance. I think people are much more likely to move around. We've seen a lot of demographic change. Of course, 50% more or less of the constituency was my previous constituency. New bits come in to create those new seats, 7 in the South East, 1 in Sussex, Kent and Hampshire. Previously, Mid Sussex had 3 MPs that covered it, the Horsham area, the South Downs area in the bottom and a bit in the middle. I was a bit in the middle, and I've sort of been split in half in the middle now. And I'm getting to know beautiful Uckfield, and hello to everyone from Harlan School. I saw their Annie production on Saturday afternoon with the mayor. There's more tickets tonight and tomorrow, so do go and see that. Looking forward to Weald on the Field, looking forward to spending more time in these villages. There's 2 great towns and about 30 wonderful villages to get around. I did about 4,500 miles during the campaign talking to people and listening to people, and you're absolutely right, you are there to represent everybody. I think the Greens were maybe a bit disappointed that their vote flatlined. I think there was a big competition between Labour Labour and the Lib Dems about who was going to come second.
My question to the Liberals on Friday when they were in talking to me was, if you took the Labour and the Liberal votes together, they got more than you did, and essentially they split that vote. It could have been very different if only one of them was standing, but who knows?
Well, I think it's important to give the voters a choice and a